Hello everyone, this is Dr. Sunita Bulla. In this session, we are going to discuss about how to containerize Spring Boot application with volume. We already know if you want to containerize Spring Boot application, first of all, we have to go with the two containers, one for backend application, Spring Boot application, another one for MySQL. So now what are the drawbacks if you containerize your uh, database with the Spring Boot application without volume? So now when you created database container without volume, first one, it is a data loss when you remove the container. By default, the container storage is temporary. If your DB container stops or crash, if you removed at any reasons, now along with the container, your entire data we will lost. Whatever data inside in the container, we will lost entire data. For example, our e-commerce application purpose, we created two tables. One is a products table, second one is a users table. If you deleted the database container, if any reasons it crashed the database container, we lost the product table and users table. That is the first disadvantage. Second one, no backup and no restore flexibility. Here, without volume, we cannot easily map database files at the same time. We cannot taking backup. Okay, we cannot take the backup. We cannot restore data. Uh, it's become a harder way. At the same time, we have to relay the dump or restore commands instead of direct accessing the files. So that is the second drawback. Next one is that it is very hard to share the data across to the container. Okay, if you want to share the DB container to the multiple applications, it is a very difficult. Other containers like analytics container migrations and monitoring tools, and if your application in the real time environment, many teams are there, analytics teams and DevOps teams and monitoring teams, whatever it is. If you want to share your data across the teams or across the containers, then it is very difficult if you are not maintaining the volume. We cannot import the data, we cannot export the data. So that is one of the drawback. Second one, inconsistency of the data during the updates. Okay. First of all, if you want to update the DB container image, we need to, for example, MySQL 8 we created. Now the old data disappears unless if you are using the volume. It will replace the old container with the new container. So now you lost your data. This force you re-import, okay, reseed your database every time. Whenever you are rebuilding the data, you have to re-import. That is one of the drawback. And next one, poor disaster recovery. If you don't have any volume, means no data outside. So in the container life cycle, if in case of crash, in case of system reboot, then accidental container removal, everything is to be reset. We cannot recover the data. So those are the drawbacks if you are not using any volume. So if you are directly work on the container, these volumes especially for the database containers and data related containers. No, these are the drawbacks. So that is the reason when you are working with the database, my suggestion is uh, we should add the volume when you are working with the database. So now next one, what is the Docker volume? The Docker volume is nothing but it is a storage. It is a storage. That storage related to the persistent. Okay, it is a volume. This volume is used to store the persistent data, and this one is managed by the Docker. Okay, when you are working with the Docker, we no need to worry about anything. So, what is the DB container? When you call the DB container, MySQL software installed into the container. So, at the same time, if you want to add the volume, if you want to add the volume to your container, simply this volume related to the persistent storage. So whatever your MySQL data, MongoDB data, and PostgreSQL data, whatever data, so we can simply store inside the volume instead of storing container. The container storage is a temporary storage. Permanently we will store. For example, in our e-commerce experiment, having two tables, products and users table. Now, first of all, I created MySQL DB container. Now, due to the reasons in that, due to the reasons, I removed the container. My container already having the volume. So, what I will do if I created new container, simply I will attach this volume to my container. So, as well as my data will be back. So simply that is the way, that is the reason we are using the volume. Next one, whenever we are reviewing internal data we lost, if we are using, we can keep the data. So now if you are using the data, we should know about the mount. So mount is nothing but adding connection. So like there are two types of mount: named mount, bind mount, and anonymous mount. Named mount is nothing but whatever you are using the volume. The volume is used by the name. Okay. If you are mentioning the volume name, that is a named volume, named bound. So generally we are going to use this mount only. Okay. Now whatever we are volume, that volume we are going to create. So this volume data going to store inside the path. So now here this is the volume. This volume is not visible. Now whenever you created, we cannot access, we cannot see that volume, but we can import and export the data. Now this is the mount volume. Bind volume is always for suggested for real-time environment, those who are working on the cloud. So now then we'll suggest a mount data. The mount data is related to host path, container path, like that. We will directly map the host folder, deployment folder. Anonymous volume means as it will created implicitly, simply outside. So then it is called anonymous volume. There are three types of mounts. Here we are going to use first mount, named mount. The volume is going to created by MySQL data like the with any name. Okay, we already discussed life cycle of the Docker Compose. Now, first of all, when you run the Docker Compose up, it starts the multiple containers. When you created a Compose down, it uninstall, deregister all the containers. Then, along with the Docker Compose down, if you use the -v, along with the containers, it removes the volume also. Whatever volume related to that application, so it related that volume also. If you want to inspect your volume, so you have, for example, your container having the volume. So if you want to inspect, if you want to do transaction, so now commands are docker volume ls, docker volume ls, docker volume inspect MySQL data. So now these two are, if you that when you type the inspect, it shows the logs, any vulnerabilities and everything we can see here. Next one, first of all, we know this one. If you want to open the DB container, simply we need to use the docker execute command. Docker execute your container name, and along with the container name, we are calling MySQL. Now this is the docker, and if you want to, if you want to backup restore your data with volume, so now simply call your whatever your execution along with the execution command. Now simply e-commerce products, we are importing the products.sql. Okay, so whatever you are importing, and I mean, for example, if you want to import your data to some other container, backup purpose, and wait, so simply we are executing this command. We are executing tables. We are importing the database. We are exporting to the database. Okay, so now SQL. Then by using this .sql file, we can export to the Excel also. In Excel also we can export or import our data. Now let's come to our experiment skill 10. It is a skill 10. Containerize backend plus MySQL with using Docker volume. So now backend plus MySQL experiment is we are going to create two containers. One is a backend container, second one is a MySQL container. Thus backend and MySQL containers have that MySQL with the Docker volume. Okay, MySQL container having with the volume. So as usual, take a backend project. As of suggestions, I'm using VS Code. Why? Because we are working on the commands. So that is the reason I am taking the VS Code. Take a backend project. Whatever we did yesterday. Take a backend project. This is the project we already uh, executed in the last session. We have two files. One is a Docker file. This is a Docker file. One is a Docker compose. Now delete previous Docker compose file. Here we are going to create new Docker compose file. So that Docker compose file is Docker compose file. So this Docker compose file. So let me explain this Docker compose file. Now here, as similarly say whatever data. Now see here, first of all, DB container. DB container, here what we are doing, container, I mean DB image name is MySQL 8. Container e-commerce DB. Username is root. Username password is root. Database is e-commerce. Here we are attaching the volume. So now when you observe here, we are attaching the volume. We are attaching volume. So now here we are using named mount. Named mount. The volume name is MySQL underscore data. This is called named mount. Now this is the uh, volume we are attaching to our DB container. So next one, backend. So this is a backend container. Container name is e-commerce backend, and similarly MySQL Spring Boot application. Spring Boot application inner environment DB. Inner environment is DB container. It's going to communicate with the DB containers. Now whatever finally the DB container attaching with the volume having MySQL data. So now this is the uh, this is the Docker file. So now whatever copy this code, paste into Docker compose.yaml file. Now okay, close your file. Before running this command, first of all, here container names, I mean image names MySQL 8.0 and e-commerce backend. and these are the names. These names already created. Just go to the Docker desktop, open Docker desktop. In the Docker desktop last class we created Docker images with the same name. Now first of all delete those images and run it again. Whatever we created in the last class, last session, delete those containers. Now see here, go to the images. So now here backend, e-commerce backend, MySQL. These two are the containers. This name Docker e-commerce backend and MySQL. So these two are the names. I'm going to delete these two containers. Now it's showing containers already. Delete I'm deleting DB container. Now delete images again. If you want to delete the image, first of all we need to delete the container. When now remove, just again docker compose up, type the command docker compose up. I'm going to rebuild this application. Click on docker compose up. It's going to rebuild containers, I mean docker images. So it's going to create two images. One is e-commerce backend, second one is MySQL. At the same time, it's going to run those images. Now, when you type the Docker compose, building running performs at a time. Now, if you Docker compose it's automatically delete the containers. But if you are using -v, Docker compose down -v, it delete the volume also. Once open Docker Hub also. Now here backend created, network created, volume created, container backend created, and a container e-commerce DB created. Now everything is created. Go to the Docker desktop. Now MySQL image created, backend image created, and those are in running mode. Go to the containers. Now here, now e-commerce backend is running. Docker e-commerce backend is running. Now here, now first of all, last session we already discussed. We no need any local system database. Why? Because we already created DB container, DB image, DB Docker image. It's a MySQL Docker image. It's already running. So what I am going to do, I am going to access this MySQL image, the MySQL container for creating the database purpose. Now, if you want to access this MySQL database container, it's not visible here, but it is in running mode. If you want to access the MySQL DB container, now just go to type the execute command docker exec your container name. So these are the container names. Now here doc e-commerce DB. We need to execute docker in e-commerce DB. Now here so docker exec e-commerce DB MySQL username and password. Execute this command. We can access this row MySQL DB. Now it's open. Before going to execute queries, first of all open the browser. Now here type localhost 8081 API products. So see here it's working properly, backend working properly. But what happens here? Empty database, empty tables. So that is the reason. Uh, we know already in the last session we already executed these queries. Show database, show table, and show tables in the products table. Execute all these queries, and finally select start from products. Table e-commerce products. Okay, yes, capital. Select star from products. So these are the products accessed. Now refresh your browser. So they are accessing, and at the same time it will connect to the front end also. Go to your Docker desktop and our front end container also running. I think e-commerce front end. Start your container. It's working. Click here, the e-commerce website. Now here, uh, then just first do the sign up. Successfully working. Click on login. It's connected to the database and all are listing here. And I click on add, it going connecting to the cart and proceed to checkout. Payment also successful. So right, so entire project is working. Now what we have to do, check users table also. Users. So one user added here. So now for example, if you want to work with the uh, volume, if especially if you want to check the volume, first of all import data. If you want to import data, we need to type the commands. First of all, if uh, if you want to check the database logs, press Ctrl C 3 times here or exit. Type exit. Okay, and now it shows all the database related logs. Press Ctrl C now. These are the database logs. What are the tables executed, queries created, like that everything is available. Now next, if you want to find the list of volumes, now Docker volume list. So here there are two volumes. This is the volume for some other by default volume. Second one e-commerce backend MySQL data. This is the volume. Now if you want to inspect, just copy, find out the name, e-commerce, name is Docker e-commerce backend MySQL data. Now here copy that name. If you want to inspect the volume. So now here it displays the details and any, for example, any errors, any reasons, any, I mean, everything is available here. Now it's an e-commerce backend, whatever is this data, binded with the e-commerce backend, and the volume name is MySQL data, and these are the details it displaying. Inspect, in the inspect it is a we can see, or we can find all the logs. Now if you want to import or execute a data, okay, now for example if you want to import or export, if you want to download, if you want to uh, upload whatever your data, now we will use this command. I'm sharing this file with you now, so we can find product.sql. System cannot specified path. So our DB name is um, e-commerce. Just wait. Okay, we are going. Okay, okay. Here, whatever your e-commerce DB, this e-commerce, we are going to import the product.sql. And now we have to enter the details, whatever inspect details it is displaying, we need to include in this these two commands. And now this is the way we are using volume. So when you are working with the data database related to, if it is a Spring Boot project or if it is a Python project, any other project, Node.js project, whatever it is that your project related to the database, if you are going to containerize your application, then suggestion is, when you are working with the database, your database container should contain the volume. So then only this should contain the volume. Then only we cannot lose our data. Thank you.